right, so welcome to another episode of the Queen's University Health Sciences Mental Health Committee podcast, where we delve into the depths of mental resilience and empowerment. We are your hosts, Maddy and Kavi, and today we have not one, but two distinguished guests with us, two mental health experts who have dedicated their careers to understanding and promoting mental well-being. Please welcome Jeff A.D. Martin and Kwesi Millington.
Jeff and Kwesi, it's an honor to have you both on the show. Before we dive into our discussion, we're just going to start off by giving our audience a little tidbit about your backgrounds, experiences, and the work that you do in the field of mental health and resilience. Through his experience as a seasoned investigator and community advocate, Jeff A.D. Martin is determined to shift hearts and minds by speaking on self-worth, self-value, and leadership. Jeff is determined to remind everyone who crosses his path that they are worth it and that they are enough.
Kwesi Millington is a former RCMP police officer who has overcome struggles professionally as well as personally dealing with PTSD and depression. He now teaches youth and high-stress organizations how to avoid burnout, build mental health, and cultivate resilience in their lives. All right, so Jeff and Kwesi, mental health is crucial, especially in today's fast-paced world. Fostering healthy coping mechanisms and practicing self-care are vital components of maintaining mental strength. From your perspectives, what are some effective strategies for staying mentally strong and resilient in the face of life's challenges? Who wants to go first?
Do you want me to go first?
Go ahead.
Wow, there's so much to go through there. Yes. Well, first off, thanks for having me again. Strategies for staying mentally strong. There's so many things to do to maintain that strength, but one of the things I find is having time to yourself is a big thing for me. So we get caught up in social media and all the things we have to do, and everything seems to be tied to a goal. And one of the things that I found when it comes to staying strong is having something that you do that is not tied at all to any kind of goal, something you do just for yourself that gives you joy. And that helps me to get other people, or just trying to, I don't know, I guess I'm losing my train of thought here, sorry. Just staying mentally grounded, I guess, is the way I want to put it.
Yeah, and I think that's important, especially because in like today's world, there's all these aspects about like distractions in a way, right? We're so constantly results driven, and we have so many resources for us to just, it's always about, attaining something. And we feel that when we achieve a certain goal, let's say we get a certain position or, get a certain grade, we feel that that's going to give us fulfillment, but it's actually the things that we do that we look forward to, like having a hobby or having a pastime or just, a relationship that's really fulfilling, like a close friend or something. Definitely tapping into that is huge. Jeff, carry on with this.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I want to say, Kavi and Maddy, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for allowing us to, just grace your platform and spread some love and words of wisdom and knowledge to your listeners. One of my answers is probably going to be an answer I'm going to give for a lot of these questions. I think it's so important for us to stay grounded, mentally grounded. And one of the things I think that we really should be doing is using affirmations. I am huge on affirmations because the world will try to tell you who you are, but you have to tell yourself who you are. And when we can affirm ourselves, we can tell ourselves who we are. Every morning we wake up, we can say, Jeff, you're amazing. Jeff, you're brilliant. Jeff, you can take on the world. Use your name and use that affirmation. Because again, we live in a world that can be cruel. We live in a world that will judge us based on how we look, based on the neighborhood we come from, based on our skin color, our gender, our sexual orientation. And the world can be cruel. So in order to ensure that we can stay mentally grounded in the difficulties that we go through, I really do believe that using affirmations, affirming who you are every day, even on the days you don't believe it, I think it's important to do that to keep you where you need to be to push through this world and the madness that we have to face every single day.
Yeah, Jeff, I really agree with that. And I think, especially in our program, Health Sciences as well, I think a lot of people, face a challenge of self-doubt and self-comparison. So I think the idea of affirmations is so, so important.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is a game changer. It is something I often speak about. Scientists have proven it. They've shown that the brain, the molecular structure of the brain starts to shift when you simply change your language. If you're someone who's shy and every day you say, I am brave, I am bold, I am brave, I am bold. Even the days you don't believe it, you say, I am brave, I am bold. You start to shift into the person that you want to become. You shift into the person that you command yourself to be. And believe it or not, we're always using affirmations, but sometimes they're negative. We say, man, I messed up on that test, I'm an idiot. Oh man, I messed up on that situation, I'm a dummy. Or we think back at that time that the situation that we can't get out of our mind, and we play it over and over again. So we're already affirming who we are every single day. But when we are specific about what we're doing, when we're deliberate about what we're doing and using positive affirmations, it really can be a game changer.
I completely agree. Yeah, shifting that language is super important. Okay, so moving on. Adversity is an inevitable part of life, and navigating adversity requires a multifaceted approach involving acknowledging and validating one's emotions, seeking support from mental health professionals or support networks, and developing a resilient mindset. So, in your guys' experience, how can individuals navigate through challenging times and emerge stronger on the other side?
Kwesi, you want to start again?
Yeah, no. Like Jeff was saying, it's gonna sound repetitive because how you look at a situation determines your ability to overcome it. And those who don't know my background, I ended up serving time in prison for a crime I didn't commit. And one of the things you have to do when you're in a situation of adversity is ask yourself, what can I take out of this that is somewhat positive, even if it's a negative situation? And for me, one of those things was I became a tutor when I was in prison, and I helped over 30 inmates get their high school diplomas while inside. And that's not because I'm so great. It's because I thought about what can I take from this situation. And you're going to be constantly handed things in life that you don't like or that are damaging to your self-esteem, but you can take back that self-esteem by saying, hey, what's one win here? What's one thing I can do that's positive? And if you can do that in every situation, you're going to win every time.
Well, that's truly
Man,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry, Kavi, to cut you off there. That is such a great answer that Kwesi just gave. I do believe that in every situation that we go through, both good and bad, and good is always easy, but the bad, the adversity that we go through, I think it's so important for us to ask ourselves exactly what Kwesi said. Like, what am I here to learn in this moment? Like, I'm dealing with COVID, I'm dealing with a family member passing away, I'm dealing with an illness, cancer, whatever it might be. What am I here to learn at this exact moment? Because when we are deliberate at trying to learn whatever lesson it is we're supposed to learn in that moment, we can now use that lesson to help ourselves and help other people. And I always say this, you could be going through a situation and it's the most difficult situation you've ever faced, and you're about to exit that situation. You're getting at the end of it. Things are starting to come around. And so you are on the very last page, the very last chapter of that book that you can't stand, as difficult as it is. But as you finish that very last page, somebody is starting the very first page of their own book. Someone is just about to go through what you just finished going through. And so now, because you went through that situation, you now have lessons, you have skills and abilities that you've picked up along the way that you can use to help somebody else, to uplift somebody else, to help your own life, and to make someone else's life better. You become a mentor because you've been through some stuff and you can show it and help somebody else who's going through it as well. So in every difficult situation, Kwesi said it, I think we have to ask ourselves, what am I here to learn? Like, what lesson can I take from this difficult situation? And then again, how can I use it to apply to my life and the life of other people? As Kwesi talked about, him going to jail, that's got to be one of the most difficult situations that anyone's had to go through. But while he was in there, what did he do? He turned around and helped 30 people graduate. I think that's the first time. I've known Kwesi for a while. I think that might be the first time I've heard that. That is mind-blowing to me. He took that situation and said, what am I here to learn? And what can I do while I'm here? And in such a negative situation where some of us might be allow depression and anxiety to take over, and I'm not saying Kwesi, Kwesi has a story, I'm sure he'll share that, but even amongst that, he said, what am I here to do and how can I make a difference? And that's exactly what he did. And when we have that type of mindset in difficult situations, I really think it can really change people's lives.
Yeah, no, certainly. And first of all, Kwesi, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's truly powerful, and it means a lot that you would open that side of you to us and share how even in times of vulnerability, you were able to find those and show empathy to those who were also in same vulnerable situations, right? That typically, in such situations, people don't really have that kind of empathy to think from that lens of just like, even though you were probably in the worst situation possible, you saw, how can I still help people? And if that's like a guiding light in your life, then I feel like that's really a good way to just self-fulfillment in general, and having a positive mental health, knowing that regardless of what stage you may be at or what you may be feeling, it's always a great day to make people smile and brighten up other people's lives. So that's really great. And thank you, Jeff, for echoing that as well. Awesome stuff. So yeah, I think this really kind of leads into our next topic of discussion in terms of the whole concept of turning turning pain into power. And I think that this is something that we discussed, that, individuals, it involves a process of reflection and growth to really reframe the narrative and find that strength and resilience. But would you guys be able to share a bit more insight on how exactly, like, what are the steps that people can take to transform those challenging experiences into sources of strength and empowerment?
Yeah, you can start with this if you want.
Yeah, how can people use the difficulties that they're going through and turn it around and use it as a strength? I really do believe that in every situation, as I just talked about, there's lessons that we can learn, but we have to be willing to apply those lessons. And I think when you have somebody who continues to go through tough situations, I think if we're not asking ourselves those questions of clarity, then we can potentially go right down the same path that we were once on. But if we can again ask ourselves, what am I here to learn? If we can ask ourselves that and really look for those answers, I really do believe it can help us in the long run. In every situation, I think there's always good. And yes, there's going to be bad, but I think in every situation, there's always good. As we're speaking now, I'm thinking about, years ago, I lost a cousin to cancer. And it was difficult because she was one of my favorite people in the world. But when I think about that situation, as tough as it was, I asked myself, what was the good that came out of it? What was I there to learn? And the funny thing is that we became closer when she was sick. We became closer when she was in the hospital, because I would go and visit her quite often. And I would sit and ask her questions. And there's days that we would talk all day. There's days that we would sit there just in silence. There's days that we would cry. There's days that we would, laugh. But we shared so much emotion within her last number of weeks and months being alive. And I got to know her so well in that period of time. And so when she did pass away and her funeral came around, there was a lot of people that were crying, and I wasn't crying. And it's not because I'm tough, but in that moment I knew that she knew exactly how I felt. Like, there was no regret, no remorse. As tough as it was, again, still losing someone that I loved so much, there wasn't a question that I had in terms of, did she love me? Did I love her? Whereas I know some other people, just who didn't take the time to visit her as much as they could have, or sit on the phone and talk with her, they missed out on that opportunity. So I do believe, again, even in every situation, as tough as it could be, there's a time for us to ask ourselves, what am I here to learn? What can I take from the situation? And so looking back, I have no regrets, with my cousin, because I recognize that there was an opportunity there to really dive in and really just show each other love. And so again, in every situation, we got to ask ourselves, what am I here to learn?
Yeah, no, I guess I feel I'm blessed. I haven't lost people my age. My dad died of cancer, but it was years ago. And I like that Jeff talked about showing love, and I think that that's one way we fill our own positivity tank. Um, I guess thank you for giving me props or kudos for saying I helped some of these inmates get their high school diploma. But the preface to that is I walked into that prison judging a lot of these guys.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? They're bad. I'm good. I'm here wrongfully. They're here justifiably. And just sitting down with some of these guys and hearing their stories, some of them were wrongfully convicted. Some of them, I could see the path that they were on. If I had been on that same path, maybe I would have made the same decision. And so that judgment was reduced, and I found things I had in common with a lot of these guys. And that made it even more gratifying when I saw them walk out with high school diplomas, because now they were almost friends, which sounds crazy inside of a prison for me to make friends. But if we make more friends, if we add value to people, I always say in my speeches, when you add value to people, you feel valuable. And that is, for me, it built my self-confidence. I was unemployed. I had nothing going on in my life, from a success standpoint, but I felt successful because I helped other people. And I think what Jeff did with his cousin, and that those connections he has and the connections he makes with the students, that built his resilience and his confidence tank as well. So sometimes, just going up to someone and saying, as he says, you are enough, or as I say to people, you matter, just building up someone's confidence, that's such a simple way to build your own confidence in yourself and your resilience as well. So that would be what I'd add to what Jeff said.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff and Kwesi. I really resonated with what you guys both said. And, I think it feels a lot of the time like, outlook isn't impactful, but I think, even if we don't have the power to change our own situation, we have the power to change our outlook, and that can be, just as important. And, in times of my life that I've, personally dealt with loss, I've found that, the way that I speak to myself and the way that, I interact with others who are experiencing that same pain can, really influence how I deal with it myself. And even like looking back, like after I've gotten out of that situation and pain, the outlook that I had that sort of got me out of it really influences, how I look at the value of the situation, even looking back. And I think that's really important as well. So that actually flows really well into our next topic, which is about negative thinking. So negative thinking can be a really significant barrier to mental well-being, and addressing negative thinking involves cognitive reconstructing or restructuring and challenging distorted thought patterns. How do you go about advising individuals to combat negative thoughts and cultivate a positive mindset within?
Well, what Jeff said about affirmations is definitely key, especially in combating those negative thoughts that we have. I think that you can read one study that'll say a certain number of thoughts that we have every day, but I think it's in the thousands. Most of them are repetitive, most of them are negative. And so combating those with affirmations is huge. But I like to do something called one win collection. So every day, at the end of the day, I try to write down one thing that went well. And even if it was a crappy day in all other ways, if I write down one thing that went well and look at that, reflect on that, look back at the end of the week, it makes a difference, because it frames your mind to start saying, you know what? Yes, I have all these things that are going on negatively, but here's something that went well on Monday. Here's something that went well on Tuesday. And it makes a difference, because it starts to frame your mind and say, you know what? If I have negative thoughts, it starts to retrain your mind to look for the positive, even if negative things are going on around you. So I challenge anyone listening, if you had a bad day, just take one positive thing that came out of the day. That's it. Write it down, go back at the end of the week and look at it again. And it does reframe your mind to start saying, when I'm going through something, what's a positive thing that I can take out of it? Because we can't avoid negative thoughts. I don't think it's a good thing to try to suppress them, like, oh, they're not happening. No, allow them to happen, but make sure you collect the positive, collect the wins as well.
Yeah, I would agree with everything Kwesi just said. Every day we are programmed. And, oftentimes we don't necessarily see it. It doesn't seem like it's obvious. But every day we turn that TV on and we're watching a TV show, there's messages that we are getting. The commercials that come on, there's messages that we're getting. We scroll through social media, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, there's messages that we're getting. And the people who are creating these messages, they're not concerned about how it affects you. They're trying, it's a business. They're trying to make a dollar. They're trying to show you cars and fast foods and commercials. They're trying to make you laugh with some of the social media. But when it's all said and done, sometimes the information that we're getting can play into our thinking. And if we are someone who continues just to digest this type of media, we're taking it all in without having anything to counteract that. So it, again, going back to what we talked about, affirmation and speaking positively to yourself, it is so important for us to program ourselves, because if we allow just the regular media that we come across just to keep feeding into us, it's going to play into thinking that may not necessarily be right or accurate. I identify as a Black man, and when I watch the news, I know that the first one or two stories are going to show something that is going to have someone that represents me, somebody who was murdered or someone who did the murdering. And this has been happening for years. If I don't pay attention to who I am, I may buy into that and say that's who I have to be. If I watch some music videos, if I see the negativity, I may see things of people that represent me, but that's not who I am. But if I'm not conscious about trying to program myself, I will just walk in the path of what I see. So it's so important for us to be deliberate. Again, I told you it's going to be repetitive. Affirmations is something that's extremely important, because again, that is a part of programming ourselves to think positively, to move positively, to identify other positive people. Because if you're positive, you're going to see those other people. You're going to see the negative ones, but you're going to see the positive ones as well. So again, I think it's so important, again, that we are deliberate with our thoughts, with our thinking, if we're trying to move away from that negativity, that depression, that anxiety. Again, I think it's important that we learn to program ourselves through the words that we say.
Yeah, no, certainly. And I think that great insights, Jeff and Kwesi. And I think this really leads into the whole aspect of cognitive distortion, like the way that we think in our mind. Our mind is like almost like a smoothie of just thoughts and feelings that we can't essentially process just because it's coming so overwhelmingly. And I feel that if we just kind of let that happen and absorb it too much, that it becomes, that's when we feel those feelings of anxiety or depressive states, and that's kind of when it all compounds together. So I think the whole aspect of, like you were saying, kind of finding positive ways and positive strategies to really kind of dissect those negative thoughts and say, hey, like this, what I'm thinking right now, what I'm feeling, it's external from who I am. It's not defining me. Like the whole idea of journaling, right? Writing down, even when, instead of telling yourself the win, why don't you write it down so that you can look back for the last month and see you have this oasis of positivity that's persisting throughout your life, regardless of all the negative things that may be happening. And I know that when, as soon as we first met, and then you started talking about affirmations, what I started doing was writing down a couple affirmations and sticking them up on my bathroom mirror all across. I've got like 50 or 60 of them up there, just so that kind of every day I look at myself in the mirror. I'm like, hey, I'm enough. Like, I'm beautiful. You tell yourself, like, positive things, and you read all those affirmations, and it reminds you to start your day with a kind of a positive outlook. And I feel like that really leads into our next discussion, like the whole idea of, I mean, hey, I'm 18 years old and I'm sitting with probably the wisest people I'll ever meet, and the influence of like that environment, like building a supportive network, I feel like is instrumental in promoting this well-being. And so from your unique professional standpoints, what do you guys think that benefits that people experience when they surround themselves with such like-minded people, especially in the context of mental health?
Well, that is a great compliment, Kavi, saying you're among the wisest people. See, I look at other people and I'm like, I have so much to learn. And that is huge. There's an old saying that says you are a product of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. And I totally believe that. They've done studies showing that people's inner circle, they make about the same amount of money. They're even about the same amount of weight. So if your group around you is losing weight, you'll lose weight. If you are around people that are into, like, I don't know, certain things, you'll do things related to what other people are doing around you. And so I surround myself with people who scare me. What does that mean? I surround myself with people who are further ahead than me, who are growing, who I look up to as saying, man, they have so much knowledge. They're doing so much better than me in a certain area. And not so that I can feel worse about myself, but so that I'll keep reaching higher. And Jeff is one of those people for me. And that's why I'll bother him every few months. I'll say, Jeff, let's go for brunch. Let's get together. I got to learn from you. And that's what I do. And maybe it sounds selfish, but I just love being around people who open my mind and make me grow. And that is mandatory. When I finished high school, I thought, or sorry, when I finished university, I said, I'm never reading another book again. I'm done with books. And that was the biggest mistake I made for probably a decade or so after I graduated. I just stopped reading because I figured I'm not forced to do this anymore. Why am I going to do this? But when I read more, when I'm getting into podcasts and audibles and hanging around with people who force me to grow, man, that's a game changer in your life. I can't speak enough about that.
Yeah, that is factual. Sidney Poitier, he is a trailblazing actor. And he once said, two people, when they go for a walk, one of two things are going to happen. Either you are going to slow down to the pace of that other person, or that person is going to speed up to your pace. So the question is, what pace are you walking at? You are always going to be influenced by the people around you. And Kavi, you've heard me say this saying before. One of my favorite quotes, and this is me. I made this one up. If you want to be a millionaire, you have to hang out with millionaires. Why is that? Because the conversation is different. If you're sitting in the room with a bunch of people and they're talking about how they're going to create businesses and create opportunities, then you just being in the room, you start learning. If you're hanging around a bunch of people who are looking to rob a bank, you're going to start learning as well. It really comes down to your choice in terms of who you're hanging around. We are, again, as I talked about earlier, the influences, the programming that we get from TV and social media is huge, but the programming that we get from the people around us is even bigger. And that includes mom and dad and grandma and grandpa, the people closest to us. We get a chance to choose who we hang around. Now, I'm not saying that you have to say, Mom, you're so negative, I never want to see you again. Like, that's mom. You know what I mean? Show her some love. However, you may want to consider, rather than spending 7 days a week talking to mom 2 hours a day, I may cut it down just a little bit because I love her, but the way mom has been programmed, I can't allow that programming to become my programming. And so it's about limiting the time you spend with those who are negative. I have a group of friends who I love to death, but the conversation that is often spoken about is sports. And there's nothing wrong with sports. I love me some sports, but very rarely does the conversation get deep. And so I said, okay, I need to find people who are like-minded because there's certain things, goals that I have for myself, and I can't achieve them by myself. Let me find people who are like-minded. And so it really led me to creating a group where there's a bunch of people who are like-minded, where we are looking to grow, to invest, to help other people, to make an impact while we're here. I found my tribe, so to speak. And so, yeah, I think it's so important for us to be very conscious about the time that we're spending with people because, again, there's people out there who just aren't looking to achieve much in this world. And if you find yourself hanging out with them quite a bit, you're not going to achieve much either. But if you're around a bunch of people, as Kwesi said, who are all about fitness, they're losing weight, they're all about trying to open a business, you are likely going to be walking down the same path when you're hanging with those type of people. So be very conscious about who you're hanging around and the conversations that you're having.
Jeff and Kwesi, thank you for your responses to that question. I think, I've also had a similar experience with that you really are the product of the 5 people closest to you. And, something that I think is super relevant to our program, Health Sciences, is this idea of competitive stress. And I've found that, a lot of the time people will sort of start talking about school in like a really negative way. So like, oh, I only got like 4 hours of sleep last night. I studied so hard for my tests, or oh, I got an 85. That's like a terrible mark. And I think, it's a really great idea to surround yourself with people who are super motivated. But to that same end, it's really important to surround yourself with people who lift each other up, because when you sort of get into this cycle of negative self-talk and the people around you are speaking poorly about themselves as well, I think it can really influence you. And as we talked before, affirmations and outlook are super, super important just in general day-to-day life and how you feel about yourself and getting yourself out of these bad situations. So yeah, I think it's super important to surround yourself with people who uplift you and motivate you, and I really resonated with that. So moving on, this is also connects really well to our next point, and it's about imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is really prevalent, especially among high achievers. So what are your recommendations for individuals to overcome their imposter syndrome, build a more accurate self-perception, and recognize their true worth?
Yeah, imposter syndrome. Turn off the noise. um, every once in a while, I'll take a break from things that increase that. Sometimes it's not about overpowering a certain influence. It's about removing the things that are influencing you. So if I find that I'm comparing myself to too many people at a certain time, I will remove myself from sources where I feel that. So if that's social media, if I have to spend more time by myself to reduce that feeling, then I'll do that. And I have a journal. I have a bunch of journals that I keep, and at the end of every journal, I will go back and I have a list of questions that I ask myself. What did I think 3 months ago or 6 months ago that I no longer think now? What wins have I had in the last 3 to 6 months, depending on how long the journals took me to write? What do I need to let go of that I held on to? And that reflection, just looking back, whether it's every 6 months or every 3 months or at the end of the year, you will start to realize that you have changed, you have grown. And the more you look at how different and how much you've grown from one period to the next, and the more you focus on that, the less you'll focus on what other people are doing or that you don't belong in a certain area. And the more kudos you give yourself, say, hey, listen, I've grown in this area. I've learned this. I believe different things. That's going to reduce your feeling of, I don't belong here. I don't belong in certain spaces. That's something that I found very, very helpful. And just not comparing yourself to other people. Comparison is a thief of joy. And it's so true. So that's one of the things I do.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Imposter syndrome really comes down to believing that you don't deserve the success that you have. And that could be on many levels. That can be that CEO, or that can be that person who just got an A on a test. I think all of us to some degree have suffered from imposter syndrome. I know I have. And, I think we have to look at, Kwesi kind of talked about it there. We have to look at the journey that we've created for ourselves. And sometimes when you're working your heads down, you don't really see the progress because you're just grinding at that business, that class, that whatever it is that you're working at. And then you pick your head up and you look around and all of a sudden you have this level of success. And you're like, oh my goodness, do I deserve this? Like, have I been working hard enough for this? But we have to sometimes look back. And I don't recommend people look back quite often because there's a lot of things back there we don't want to see. We don't want to remind ourselves of because we're always growing. However, I think it's important sometimes to look back to see how far we've come, to see that we have made progress. If you were to take a pencil and a paper and write down all the things you've accomplished over the last year, 2 years, 5 years, 6 months, whatever it is, you will see that success that you now have, it belongs to you. It is yours. You've earned it. However, when we just pick our head up and look around and we see the success, it feels like we don't belong in that space. But we have to start to believe that we do belong in that space. We have to believe that we did earn a seat at that table. You deserve a seat at that table. And so, yes, Kwesi talked about it. I think we need to limit the again, programming, limit the programming that will tell us that we're not good enough. And again, that sometimes that is coming off of social media, stepping away from that person we might be comparing ourselves with. Because again, when you make certain progresses in life, you've probably deserved it. And again, if you look back and see the path that you've taken to get there, you would see that you, just like anybody else, you worked hard. You really pushed through situations and things of that nature to get you to where you are now. So yeah, I think it's very important for us to look back to see the things we've done to get to where we are now, to get that success.
No, 100%. And I think that especially like particularly in Health Sci being such a competitive program, the idea that the thing I've heard most, I think, out of everything this year, more than hello, how are you, is that Kavi, I don't deserve that. I don't believe that I deserve to be in this program. I feel like that sentence is so common. Just that saying that, oh yeah, I don't deserve to be here. These people are too exceptional and I don't feel like I fit in. And I think that's a huge aspect of the way, like I tell people, I'm like, well, listen, you're here for a reason, so make the best of it. Right, that aspect that either when you're surrounded, like Kwesi, you were saying, when you're put in a room of people that may be ahead of you in some ways, you can either take that as a way to diminish yourself or take that as a way to uplift yourself and kind of use everyone's unique experiences and insights. Like I think that having a group of, we've got about 200 people in our program, like a group of just like-minded people all together, think about like the creativity, the productivity that we can all have working together and putting our minds together instead of bringing each other down. And so, yeah, my mom, she's a psychotherapist, and something she often says in her practice is that often imposter syndrome comes from being not able to tell the difference between a judgment and a fact. A judgment being something that you believe about yourself negatively, whereas a fact being something you can see with your two eyes. And I think that that's huge, like especially in the context of that academic validation that, let's say you get a grade that you're not happy with. Let's say, you look at it as, oh, I'm incredibly stupid. I don't deserve to be here. This was awful, that where you externalize it and you feel that either society wrong, that you got wronged by your professors, you got wronged by yourself, or you can just take the accountability and say, listen, I got 75 on this test. You can just say that to yourself, the fact, like you tell yourself the exact mark that you got without anything associated to it. You can say, I got 75 on this test. What does that say about me? That doesn't make me stupid. That doesn't define me. And if I would like a higher mark, then I will just work to get a higher mark next time. Like you can say to yourself exactly what happened, rather than connoting, like using that piece of evidence to say that, oh, I am not good enough because of that particular mark that I got. So definitely something that we can all explore, and especially in such a high-strung environment, individuals feel that idea that success needs to be 24/7, that imposter syndrome really comes for people who are academically high-strung and socially as well.
And so, Kavi, let me just add to that as well. Imposter syndrome, you kind of talked about it there. Imposter syndrome, it comes down to people believing that they don't belong in that space, right? But who told you that you don't belong in that space? Who made you believe that you don't belong in that space? Why don't you deserve to get that A? Why don't you deserve to open that business? Why don't you deserve to make $100,000 in 3 months? Like, why don't you deserve it? Like, why does someone else deserve it, but you don't? And so again, it comes back to the self-esteem, the self-worth, the self-love or lack thereof, and believing that somebody else deserves that and you don't, but you do deserve it. Like, nobody was born with a special gene. Like, Beyonce is amazing, for example, but she wasn't born with a special gene. She just saw this goal for herself and she chased it. LeBron James, he just saw this goal for himself and he chased it. You can use any celebrity. They saw that goal and they chased it. But we tell ourselves that we're not good enough. We tell ourselves that we don't belong in that space. You do belong in that space. You belong. You deserve a seat at that table. You deserve the opportunity to show the world who you are. So when we're talking about imposter syndrome, I believe it comes back to the fear. That's the fears that we have. Imagine we lived in a world without fear. Like, how much further would we go? Like, we're talking about going to the moon, maybe Mars. Like, if we all just lived without any type of fear, how far would we have traveled by now? Like, we wonder in awe at an airplane, but like, if we all decided to just step through, like, how many type of flying objects and just different things, time machines, how many things would exist if we just decided to step through that fear? You deserve to be at that table. You deserve to get that A. You deserve all the things that you want in life. We have to get away from looking at people and saying, oh, they deserve it and not me. You deserve to be there as well.
100%. Very well said.
So unfortunately now we are out of time, but Jeff and Kwesi, we just really want to thank you for sharing your expertise and shedding light on the importance of mental resilience. It was an absolute pleasure to get to know you and hear your amazing insights. To our listeners, remember that seeking support is a sign of strength, and there are resources available to help you and navigate life's challenges. Join us next time for another insightful episode of the Queen's University Health Sciences Mental Health Committee podcast. Until then, prioritize your mental well-being and continue excelling on the path towards resilience and self-fulfillment.